Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with the midweek update in the world of cannabis. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And then of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready. But we're going to start with Illinois' adult use cannabis sales for the month of December, as we have the total amount of sales for 2021. And as we can see, compared to November, which brought in 120.7 million, December crushed it in all avenues. So total items sold, they set a new record of 3.1 million. In-state resident sales jumped from 81.7 in November to 95.6 million in December. Out-of-state sales residents jumped from 39 million to 42.3. So obviously out-of-state residents knew that they wanted to go stock up before the holidays, for total sales of 137.8 million. Total sales of $1.379 billion, which is a big jump from total sales in 2020, which equated to 669 million, representing over a 50% year-over-year increase. And what I wanted to add as well is that Illinois did hand out many new licenses in 2021, over 100, mostly to social equity applicants, but also to other applicants. And from my understanding, it takes time for these licenses to turn into dispensaries, and I don't believe many of them have opened yet. So if this amount of sales came from the same amount of stores that was available in 2020, that is a great sign that when more stores come online, it's obviously just going to help drive the sales, but at the same time, it'll bring costs down for citizens of Illinois, and it will just help sort of facilitate the expansion of this industry in Illinois. So love to highlight that. On to this one from Independent Rec. Citizens of Montana bought more than 1.5 million in cannabis on opening weekend of recreational sales, highlighting that the demand for a legal, safe product is there in every single state that launches an adult program, and that's pretty impressive when you consider their population is less than 1 million. And so this is according to the state revenue department, and while they might have been worried about how the sales would turn out, I imagine that they're quite pleased that they exceeded expectations. So the statewide 20% sales on recreational cannabis, that opening weekend haul, 1.5 million amounts to 313,000 in tax revenue for the state from just that first weekend. The Department of Revenue's Cannabis Control Division tallied a combined sales of just under 2 million with recreational and medical sales last Saturday and Sunday. And the 4% tax on the 432,000 in medical sales provided an additional 17,000 in tax revenue to the state. So we love to see this out of Montana. Strong sales to begin with, the first state to legalize or to at least launch their adult use program in 2022. On to this one from Tucson.com, looking at the success that Arizona has seen since launching their adult use program on January 1st of 2021, saying that the state is projected to top 2 billion in cannabis sales already. Now, I did not believe this was true. I thought there had to have been a mistake and a typo, but looking through it, there is a report here, so I just want to add Arizona cannabis industry is flush with green literally. In 2021, Arizona is projected to see an estimated 2.14 billion in sales between the medical and newly legal adult use recreational market, according to an updated forecast report from an industry-leading data tracker Headset. Now, obviously, this requires Headset being accurate, but I looked at the report, and another factor is that we have not seen a lot of just direct information from Arizona, but we did hear at some point, I think of September, that they surpassed 1 billion in sales. So a high-level overview of the Arizona cannabis market. This is a report that you can share with your email and grab from Headset, so the link will be below. But just to scroll down, this was a chart that I shared around in September and October in my videos because we got this out and we're like, oh wow, Arizona is actually on a pretty amazing pace. Then if we scroll down though, this was something I hadn't seen before, and I thought it was a great visual to highlight because it's comparing Arizona, Illinois, and Michigan. And if we think Illinois and Michigan are fast-growing markets, just take a look at the combined med and rec sales from Arizona. And so while this was completely unexpected, it was a great thing for me to find. And so obviously this link will be below if you want to grab it and check it out and read more. But that's very positive out of Arizona as they're crushing it. While we have this update out of Connecticut, businesses can apply for recreational cannabis licenses in Connecticut starting next month. So although they have delayed the official launch, it's good that they're getting the ball rolling, as Connecticut's Social Equity Council on Tuesday approved a plan to provide technical assistance for applicants to the recreational use cannabis program, marking the panel's last step before the state can open applications for new business licenses. So hopefully this means that they will end up launching sometime earlier in 2022 as opposed to later. On to this one from the Office of Medical Cannabis Use, highlighting the past week in Florida before the year end, and their qualified patient count increased to 656,370, which is an increase of 2,719 patients from the month before. Now, it was obviously probably a quieter week due to the holidays, but from December 27 to 31, it appears Curaleaf was the only one to open a new dispensary during that time. time, but if we scroll down, we do see that the numbers have come back down to reality a little bit, as opposed to the massive spending increase that we saw the week before Christmas. But nonetheless, sales across the board are strong, and you can take a look here from December 24th to 30th to see how many milligrams of THC, milligrams of CBD, and ounces of smokable flower was sold by any of the potential MSOs that you might own that have a footprint in Florida. So on to some other tweets. This one from Jungle Java, as expected, MSO gang, and given the end of day dip, there was a nice inflow of cash and an in-kind share for the Advisor Shares MSOS ETF. So here are the changes made as of January 3rd. So as of Monday close, the cash position increased to 85.8 million, up from 71.7 million at the start of Monday, highlighting that the demand is still there, and some investors know that the setup for 2022 has never been better, and they anticipate some catalyst might be coming in too. But as a long investor, I don't focus on the day-to-day changes in the holdings. I do just try to focus on making sure that more cash is coming in as opposed to leaving. And then I wanted to share this interview from Yahoo Finance with the CEO of Advisor Shares, Noah Hamman. And so while we know Dan Aarons or Todd Harrison as portfolio managers for Advisor Shares, he is the CEO. And he goes on an interview with Zach Guzman from Yahoo Finance, stating more states are legalizing either for medical use or for adult use, and so the fundamentals are still there. And he's adding, in a weird sort of way, it's really creating this moat for these U.S. multi-state operators. And if you've studied any Warren Buffett in your life, you know that when he looks at undervalued companies, one of the factors the companies must have is a moat that's going to make it difficult for any competitors to come in and disrupt what they're doing.
Yeah, it goes down quite a bit, after a strong early start. And I think, I believe in it because the opportunities and the fundamentals are still showing positive growth, right? States are still coming online. I just saw a headline today from Texas with Beto now starting to run on a campaign and of legalizing it in Texas. Now, I don't know that I believe politicians when they say that. We saw a lot of that last year. So for me, I'm truly focusing on the fundamentals. If you look at any of their sales growth numbers, any of their revenue growth numbers, not for all of them, but certainly for some of the tier one MSO players, the Green Thumbs and the Trulies of the world, who I know, Zach, you've talked to on the show before, their numbers are improving. And yes, they don't have a great tax situation because of the difficult, federal situation along with the IRS and how they're overtaxed, really. But they are growing. More states are coming online. New York's going to take a little bit longer than expected, but more states are legalizing either for medical use or for adult use. And so the fundamentals are still there, and they're still strong. And in a weird sort of a way, it's really creating this moat for these U.S. multi-state operators that's blocking any of the companies that we might typically see on the screens of Canopy and Aurora and Tilray. This makes it far more difficult for them to come into the U.S. And so it really only solidifies the opportunity ahead for the companies that at least that we would hold in our MSOS ETF. So I wish that at least at a minimum, the federal government would take the opportunity to fix the social justice aspect of things, but then they really need to work on the social equity of things. But in the meantime, states are leading, the fundamentals are improving, and so even after a difficult year, famous saying of sort of, when things go on sale in the stock market, people have a tendency to run away from it, even though they'll do something differently, when their favorite product's on sale. And in many ways, if you're a cannabis investor, this is that opportunity, at least we think. Now, still volatile ride ahead. These are still small emerging companies.
And although small comparative to other industries, the Tier 1 MSOs are already profitable or near profitable despite the 280E tax that they have to face. So fundamentals are what I focused on in 2020. Obviously in 2021, I got enthusiastic and thought that the politicians might keep their promises. My mistake, lesson learned. I'm going back to focusing on the fundamentals because they are there and they are strong. And the fact is that as long as new states reform their laws, the total addressable market is going to continue to expand, and that will drive the growth. So just wanted to jump over this one coming soon. 15 states that could legalize cannabis in 2022, while Connecticut, New Mexico, New York, and Virginia, and New Jersey all legalized in 2021. So they're already legalized. We're waiting for their market to come online. But states that could legalize in 2022, likely adult use in Delaware. So you can pause to read. I'm not going to read through all of it if you wanted to. Oklahoma, adult use, which is a very successful medical market. Mississippi for medical, which would be great to see. Now, these are maybes. Maryland for adult use, but I'm pretty sure it's going on the ballot. Ohio, maybe for adult use, but also something there's an effort to put that on the ballot. Wyoming for medical, Pennsylvania for adult use, while there are efforts to put this on the ballot, and there's also efforts from the GOP in Pennsylvania to pass adult use legislation. And then lastly, Rhode Island, which should be passed sometime in early early 2022, just based on some reporting that I did last week. Nebraska for medical as well. And then to watch, Arkansas for adult use, Florida for adult use. These are likely the ones that are less likely, but still in the works. Missouri for adult use, North Carolina for medical, South Dakota for adult use. The last wild card being Idaho for medical. So just wanted to share this, that MSO fundamentals will continue to improve as long as states reform their laws. And states ought to reform their laws because cannabis is a safe medicine and Americans need a safe alternative to opioids. And so the only thing we cannot control is time, how long this will take. So all you can do as an investor is control yourself. It's an older article. Just wanted to relay that to back up what he says about the fundamentals. But on to this one, a different perspective. Todd Harrison shares this from Kass, who's a hedge fund manager of Seabreeze Capital Partners LP. And this is his recent take on U.S. cannabis. Now, if you've watched my videos in the past, Kass was aggressively buying MSOS in October and November because he sees what we see. And so he's just providing this update. And so just wanted to relay this. Based on my recent research, the Q4 2021 and full year 2022 consensus estimates for most cannabis companies are a bit too high. Until recently, the analytical community, with some exceptions, have been late to report this, in my honest opinion, but if my research is correct, we should begin to read this sort of commentary in the next 1 to 2 weeks. I apologize, I didn't know that, but I'm just trying to be the messenger and relay any information that I get. By contrast, some cannabis companies have already begun to reveal somewhat worsening relative to consensus expectations in demand supply in their recent communiques with investors. The positive is that the stocks are on their butts and their low share prices seem to have mostly discounted some state-level cannabis market weaknesses. To be realistic, a recently more than expected competitive and less profitable market in states like California, widely recognized already, but also Florida, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania, means that cannabis stocks will need legislative advances, which I feel are coming in the short term, to drive position investors or positive investor sentiment in the group. If I'm wrong about the more positive decriminalization and legalization initiatives in January and February, hopefully those do come, because obviously we're not there yet, the slightly weakened fundamentals could raise some total addressable market concerns. This morning, we have begun to see some realism from the sell side, and we are bound to see more in the days ahead. So it's good to share both perspectives, but also just wanted to highlight that when he says here that these MSOs, where is it? It's positive that the stocks are on their butts, and that the low share prices seem to have mostly discounted some state-level cannabis market weaknesses, because that is true. And obviously, the lower the share prices fall, the less risk you have as an investor in starting a position in those companies then. So just wanted to bounce off of what Noah Hamman said when he highlighted that it's funny how people will act when their favorite products will go on sale. They'll rush to buy it because they think they're saving money buying something on sale, versus if their favorite company with solid fundamentals in the fastest growing emerging market in the US, the share price falls, therefore the stock goes on sale, people run away when you should be buying that, because obviously if you have the patience to wait and when the sentiment changes, that is you're going to get rewarded. So I hope that example wasn't too confusing, but I also just want to elaborate on some points he makes, like certain markets such as Florida, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania not seeing the overall growth that past projections had anticipated. And on top of that, this comes from Kush Daddy 101, who got his data from Kass. And so if this is accurate, then I'm very lucky that I've chosen Cresco Labs as my largest holding, because under the surface, strong PA market share grab by certain operators despite the headline that states sales softness in Q4. So although the overall sales might soften, it depends on who's getting the most market share. And as a Cresco Lab shareholder, this is obviously good for me to see and makes me happy if this is accurate. But we can see that Cresco, Green Thumb, and Cureleaf definitely have the most market share versus TerraSen, Columbia Care, and Trulieve, where Trulieve had a very high amount in Q2, but that has fallen off as they're probably trying to focus on other markets. But happy to relay that apparently, according to this data, Cresco Labs is the number one in PA market share in flower and vapes. And so that is one beneficial thing when you focus on brands, is that you can pick up that popularity over time. This is another visual from CC Invest, consensus revenue estimates for 2022 on MSOS holdings, the top MSOS holdings via Young Justin. And Young Justin, he's a student that likes to do calculations and run spreadsheets. So you can check him out and see if you want to take this as fact. But at the same time, just he's run calculations, and this is what he sees as the 2022 full year revenue aggregate estimates today in US dollars for the top MSOs. And you might be thinking, well, where is Verano in there? It's not that he doesn't like them or anything. He didn't include it since it's a new issuer and only has 8 analysts with estimates versus 15 of the other tier ones, but here are their charts. So I'm not going to go through that, but just to relay what he anticipates based on the data that's available from estimates. Actually, you might not be able to see these numbers, so let me just close it and run them off. As Trulieve Cannabis Corp. expected to do $1.55 billion in sales, Green Thumb Industries $1.13 billion, Cureleaf Holdings $1.63 billion, Cresco Labs $1.14 billion, Air Wellness $760 million, TerraSen Corp. $413 million, Columbia Care Inc. $718 million, and Jushi Holdings $397 million. So thank you, Young Justin and CC Invest, for sharing this, just so that we can take a look and compare, especially relative to the revenues that they're going to bring in 2022 compared compared to current market caps right now? Because I haven't checked recently, but one of the main reasons I invested in Cresco at the beginning was because they're anticipated to do the same amount of growth as the other four, but their market cap was just much lower. And when you look at this, they're actually anticipated to beat Green Thumb. And I don't know what Green Thumb's market cap is as of right now, but it's always been probably double or much higher than Cresco's. So again, that's not advice, but just pointing that out. On to a few others from Todd Harrison. This is VA cap on US cannabis. So just going to open this up. I'm not going to read it, but you can pause to read if you want. That's a bit of information from investment firms. So again, not advice, speculation still. And this one from CGF on US cannabis as well. You can pause to read if you want to check that out. And so just a few more. This comes from Matt Lemers, and just wanted to highlight this as Canadian cannabis producers' sales growth in Q4 2021 over Q3. Apparently some of the big LPs have seen their sales decrease quite a bit. Now, obviously, my main holding in Canada is Tilray, but I own them for Germany in the long run as well. So this is unfortunate to see, but just highlights that some of the small growers growing premium good cannabis, Oxley, Aleafia, Kronos, and Organigram, they're picking up their market share. And Sundial, Pure Sun Farms, Hexo, Canopy, Tilray, Aurora, all the names that we see regularly are also losing their market share. So it's not ideal. And if any of them don't have a footprint in a European country that can drive a lot of their sales, they're going to be suffering as well in Canada. And so lastly, just wanted to share this one from Nat's Fertig. If this actually goes through, depending on what the filibuster reform looks like, it could have a major impact on the chances of passing comprehensive cannabis reform. And right now, Schumer doesn't have 50 Dems on board, but if he didn't need 60 votes, his chances would go up. And this comes from a tweet from CNN. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announces vote to change the filibuster rules, but faces resistance from Sens Manchin and Sinema. Now, the thing is, I don't know a whole lot about this, but from my understanding was that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer could do what's called the nuclear option and announce a vote to change the filibuster rule so that he could try and pass CAOA with 50 votes. Now, that's just what I've seen online, and this is still up in the air, but from my understanding, Manchin and Sinema will not allow this. So just wanted to share this information, as this could possibly be what Schumer thinks he can get done, but it would be pretty consistent with what we see with Democrats thinking and then realizing once we get there, I can't actually do that. So just wanted to share this as this was new information. But this is an interesting article coming from Fortune, I believe. Democrats and Republicans need cannabis to exorcise the ghosts of elections past. And this is true. I just wanted to share who's writing this. David Culver. Does he have any, incentive to try and get cannabis legalized in the U.S.? Oh, he might actually, because he's the VP of Global Government Relations. So not to take away from his writing, because everything that he writes in here is true, but just goes to show that efforts being made in helping influence the U.S. and get the word out there. So just going to scroll down to some of the main juice. The current political calculus overwhelmingly favors cannabis legalization. Public support is at a 5-year high and is no longer limited to the left or center. Today, more than half of Republicans back cannabis reform. In 2020, voters in red Montana and purple Arizona approved ballot measures allowing recreational use, making cannabis fully legal in a majority of states. So look to 2022 and 2024 battlegrounds, and you'll see additional momentum behind cannabis reform. Michigan legalized recreational cannabis 3 years ago. In Virginia, where the governorship just flipped, recreational cannabis legalization passed earlier this year. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin have bills pending as well. Federal lawmakers have taken notice. Republican Representatives Dave Joyce and Nancy Mace have both in recent weeks introduced cannabis reform measures, which have much better chances of passing than Schumer's does. So in 2022, all eyes will be on the U.S. Senate, where Senators Cory Booker, Ron Wyden, and Chuck Schumer are expected to introduce the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. Bipartisan compromise is truly possible as long as Schumer is willing to work with Nancy Mace's bill, most likely. Reaching this compromise is in both parties' interest too, of course. Democrats, starting with President Biden, must lead on cannabis policy or risk ceding the very real voter enthusiasm it inspires to more libertarian voices. Republicans sense the opportunity in freedom-laced arguments for cannabis reform, while incumbents, especially those in moderate states and districts, are eager to seize the issue as their own. And so these forces may soon converge to push sensible bipartisan cannabis reform legislation through an otherwise divided Congress. Such a once-in-a-lifetime generation accomplishment would advance social equity, create millions of jobs, and generate billions in federal taxes that could be invested in programs to help families, veterans, communities of color, and small businesses through the rest of COVID-19 pandemic. David Culver is Vice President of Global Government Relations for Canopy and a board member of the U.S. Cannabis Council. But he makes a good argument, and all this is true. And so that is why the setup for this year couldn't be more perfect, and ultimately ending cannabis prohibition will solve so many domestic issues. Makes no sense why this isn't something that the Dems led on in 2021, but nonetheless, this is why 2022 does look plausible. So on to some other news out of MSOs. Columbia Care opens its 80th dispensary with new cannabis location in Virginia Beach. So they announced this a few days ago. opened up Cannabist Virginia Beach, its 4th dispensary in the Commonwealth, and 23rd Cannabist nationwide. And so a little bit more info about Columbia Care and Virginia, as the new dispensary marks Columbia Care's 4th location in Virginia, following its recently approved acquisition of G-Leaf, and the company is licensed to operate a market-leading total of 12 dispensaries between Columbia Care and G-Leaf to serve the growing base of nearly 40,000 registered medical patients across the state. To support this retail footprint, Columbia Care currently operates nearly 148,000 square feet of existing cultivation and production capacity, and has a fleet of delivery vehicles able to serve the entire state. So good on Columbia Care getting into one of those less saturated states and building their footprint early, while incoming Virginia GOP governor won't overturn legal cannabis possession, but casts doubt on sales. And so advocates have been closely following Governor-elect Glenn Youngkin as he prepares to take office later this month, with some expressing concerns that he may seek to interfere in the implementation of the cannabis legalization law that Democratic lawmakers passed last year. In an interview with Virginia Business that was published on Friday, Youngkin made clear that he will not seek to overturn the law on personal possession, but he's not making the same commitment with respect to cannabis commercialization. And so a Virginia legislature Cannabis Oversight Panel looked into the issues like licensing and regulatory authority at a meeting last month, and members voted to recommend expediting the timeline for launching retail sales by 1 year to January 2023, which makes sense economically, because if you just allow the black market to run rampant, it just increases crime and makes organized crime groups stronger. So it remains to be seen whether the full legislature will ultimately adopt that recommendation, which makes sense when members reconvene this month under the new incoming Republican leadership in the House of Delegates and with a skeptical new governor in office. But I hope he does, because all this highlights is that as it stands under the current law, sales are currently only set to begin in 2024, set by Democrats, which again really just encourages lawlessness, crime, and organized crime to flourish. So again, it just really makes no sense. And so hopefully the Republicans, with their economically thinking heads on their shoulders, come in and say, yeah, January 2023 makes more sense. That way we create a legal market. That way we create tax dollars and jobs for, legal tax dollars and legal jobs for citizens in the state. And on to this one from Kentucky. As Kentucky Democratic leaders say medical cannabis legalization will be top 2022 legislative priority. At a press briefing, party leaders from the House and Senate laid out their goals for the new year, highlighting cannabis reform as one of the several major issues for the year in a list that also includes expanding healthcare, voting access, legalizing sports betting, and universal pre-K education. Another thing enjoys widespread support among Kentuckians and is just long overdue is common sense cannabis laws. Senate Minority Leader Morgan McGarvey said, "We must go ahead and get medical cannabis passed in Kentucky this session." So that would be great, especially for the citizens of Kentucky. My God, I got to slow down. My apologies. So good job, Kentucky Democrats, for getting that ball rolling. Well, this comes from Econ Papers. Just wanted to share some interesting findings as high times for U.S. employees, human resource management considerations in addressing cannabis legalization in U.S. organizations. So the purpose of this research is to determine if medical cannabis should be protected in the workplace and under what conditions. Based on the literature, 3 research questions were posed and 3 hypotheses were tested based on the analyzing data from a survey questionnaire that was completed by 57 working adults. Results indicate that they support the use of medical cannabis as a viable medical treatment, and companies should recognize and support this medical remedy. Yes. Results indicate employees should be protected in their use of cannabis under the FMLA. Results also indicate cannabis should also be considered for long-term and permanent illness under the ADA. Implications are employees see cannabis in a positive light as a viable medical treatment, as it is, and expect human resource management to support policies that allow for the use of cannabis. So great to see this relay, as it's a study not in the health focus, but in economics and normalizing this just in normal industry, which we would love to see. And this was an interesting one from French Toast I wanted to share. Want a higher quality of life? Use cannabis daily, says new Brazilian mental health study. Interesting. Well, what does this say? Study published by the Journal of Psychiatric Research, and you can grab that here. All links will be below. Focused on cross-sectional research conducted on 7,405 participants. 89% of them claimed to be cannabis users, and 11 were non-users. Within the cannabis group, researchers divided into smaller groups such as habitual users, occasional users, and problem users. The participants answered an online survey that checked for things like their well-being, anxiety levels, and depression scores. And roughly 17% of participants claimed to be occasional users, 64 habitual users, and 7.7 considered they had a problem with cannabis. So according to the study, you can pause to read for a little bit more information here. But in other words, the study concluded that people who smoked cannabis regularly had higher quality of life scores than those who weren't smoking. This is an interesting finding, especially since cannabis use is typically said to decrease the quality of life. But that's made by false claims by scared prohibitionists that, again, just don't want to accept a different reality that might be true. And so, or at least this was the basis for sustaining prohibition for so long, and sadly that never worked. And that's why we must overturn this as soon as possible to right the past wrongs. However, with the study points out is that the habitual, non-problematic user views life in a more favorable light than the non-smoker. So it's an interesting study, and personally, I do use cannabis every day. I save it to my evenings, but I do find it improves the quality of life. So I'm a testament to the study, but you know, it's here for anyone to take a look if you want to grab the links below. But very interesting findings that definitely go against what the prohibitionists have claimed falsely for such a long time. And so lastly, this one from MJBiz Daily, 10 cannabis industry trends to watch for 2022. So I'm not going to go through it all, but just going to highlight them. M&A will march on, that's without a doubt. Brands will grow across all sectors, including cultivation, retail, and infused products. More California municipalities will opt out to cannabis. Cannabis companies will increasingly call for lower state taxes, as they should, and as states should comply if they want a stronger legal market in the long run. Help them out in the short run to, for better results in the long run. Market share loss will lead to M&A action up north. Incorrect growth and profitability assumptions will persist in Canada. The pandemic will further solidify the cannabis industry's reputation as recession-proof. Love that. Climate change unpredictably will continue. Momentum builds for social equity and more states will legalize cannabis, but the federal government probably won't. Highlighting the great American state-led growth story is still fully intact. And a few things to add, according to MJBiz Daily, what's more likely to happen is that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's comprehensive cannabis reform bill will stall in the Senate. We want it to stall because if you try to tax the top players in any industry at 25%, that's just going to crush it. It's not allowing for sustainable growth over time, and that would allow big alcohol and big tobacco to swoop in and buy them up. So that's why we do not want that to pass. However, according to MJBiz Daily as well, the more plausible scenario, cannabis banking reform could then be considered a standalone measure in the upper chamber, but then MJBiz Daily thinks, according to them, no vote will likely be taken before the 2022 elections. That's fair, but if no vote is taken, then I think it's 100% sure that the Dems will lose the House and the Senate if they don't take this easy win on cannabis, which means that this year we could possibly also see is SAFE plus Biden using his clemency powers to expunge records, and I think that would make the Dems happy and everyone in the cannabis industry happy, and that would be the best case scenario. But obviously we don't know, we're just going to have to wait and see. But as investors, be patient and keep averaging down if you believe in this growth story. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.